You're listening to The Tiger and the Viper.
14. It was interesting to watch a building start to fall apart. It didn't happen all at once, and it took me a while for me to notice, but after a time, I could begin to pick out and catalog where the marble floor had become pockmarked, or a patch of paint that was a different blue than the rest of the walls. I guess that's how decay works. A thing comes to be, takes time to grow, then its existence begins to erode out of existence, sanded down until it disintegrated back into the parts that make up the whole. In a lot of ways, people decayed like buildings did. Long before you could see a building's facade crumble, its interior would fall into dysfunction. I'd always been a good example of that. Los Robles looked like a big, giant library than a hospital. Red oak walls and tiled floors, long stretches of warmly lit corridors. It was old when I started coming here as a kid, but even now, a week before 9th grade, it was starting to show its age in the gray, sagging corners where the old bulbs couldn't reach. I kept track of all the little places this hospital was falling apart because I was also falling apart. I just hoped not as quickly, but no one really knew for sure. The cataloging kept my mind active on the long stretches back to my room, my mother pushing my wheelchair. Mom wouldn't speak much in the hospital. It wasn't because she was quiet, she just had a thing about hospitals. She thought that anything you said in a place that had this much spiritually coming and going, it all had a chance of coming true. People used to ask me if that was a cultural thing, my mom being quiet like that. That was a stupid question. The truth was that my mom was a superstitious woman. She had 1,000,001 rules about what would bring bad luck because even as a child, she believed that she was surrounded by it. A thorny shrub, something that would get caught on your clothes and brought back home. The belief was that every misstep over a threshold, every whistle at night, every time we passed the 4th floor of the hospital, it all brought her karmically down a path she couldn't return from. The reality, though, was that my genes were rewritten, just like my future, the moment doctors made the first slice into my embryo. Everything that followed was just a consequence, and no amount of whistling could change that in my book. I was doomed to fall apart the moment I was born. But I guess we all are. She wheeled me back into my room and parked the wheelchair next to my bed. I watched her take the clothes from my wardrobe and begin to fold them back into my duffel bag. She always folded them the same way, 3 lengthwise folds and then rolled to prevent wrinkles, just like how she'd pack away her finished garments for clients at home. Your exams are next week. Have you been studying? Gemma told me that she hasn't seen you reading as much, my mother said, referring to the ward nurse. I made a note to catalog Gemma as a narc. I have, I ground out dutifully. The medication's just making me more tired than usual. I'm just taking more breaks between reading. It was something the doctors had warned about. A stronger dose of the ACE inhibitors would potentially affect my blood pressure and, possibly later, produce an unwelcome dry cough. But they kept my heart working, so I guess I couldn't stand to be picky. Minja, you have to try, she pleaded, shaking a rolled-up shirt at me. I am trying, Mom. My head and my body are just tired. I spent the last week in hospital doing stress tests and getting machines hooked up to myself, I said, trying to keep the tired annoyance from my voice. None of this was worth an argument, and I was exhausted. Minja, you missed the last week of school because you've been here, she said. Well, I need to be here, I gestured around the room. But you don't need to be here up here, she tapped her temple at me. Minja, you cannot let the other students in your class get ahead of you because you're not feeling good. We all don't feel good sometimes, but life goes on, whether or not we're part of it. You need to keep pushing. I looked at her for a moment, wanting to push myself off this wheelchair more than anything else, just to get a rise out of her, but I decided that wasn't worth it either. It'd take me forever to get me back up. I took a steadying breath and smoothed out the stress on my face. You're right, Mom. I'll apply myself harder, I simply said. It didn't matter if I told her the students were already a whole unit ahead of me in classes like physics. I wasn't planning on becoming a physicist anytime soon, much to her chagrin, I'm sure. I watched the anger melt from her frame, and she dropped a rolled pair of pants in my duffel. We should get you some toffee, something sweet, to make everything stick, she said in lieu of an apology, the way she always did. I gazed at her from the side of my head, too tired to turn my body all the way to face her. She was no longer paying attention to me, but focused on getting me packed. So I slumped back into my chair and pictured myself out of it in a few days, going right back to the dance studio and going over all of my new steps. An exhaustion settled into me that I couldn't explain. This was supposed to be every girl's dream, to be molded into a star. Everyone was always saying that. So why did I just feel so tired? Again, The choreographer clapped. There was a real heat to her voice this time, annoyed that she had to repeat herself yet again. Minjae, you're half a step off on the last part. You need to speed it up. I took a moment to pant through the burning knot in my calf, catching my breath. My body felt slower than normal today, and I was just trying to work through the fatigue. The other girls around me didn't seem as winded, and that killed me. Instead, they eyed me over their shoulders with a detached malice in their eyes, the way you looked at something pathetic that would not live. That's the problem with designer braids, someone said under their breath. All kinds of genetic problems. Fuck you, I bit back, coated in sticky sweat. At least I was fucking trying. You know what, young lady? I need you to sit it out for a little bit. The choreographer readjusted her hat and pointed to the far wall. I'm good. It's fine. I raised my hands to plead my case. You're not fine. Go drink some water and sit it out. You can come back when you have a cooler head. I snatched my canteen and headed towards the far wall, dropping down to the floor. My whole body was screaming from the exertion, which, despite the humiliation of being singled out, at least now I could try to get a moment to take stock of my body. The toll of 12 hours of catch-up practice was starting to settle into all of the tiniest bones of my feet, all the places where my hips met my leg. What I wanted to do was take the practice heels off and rub my aching feet, but I didn't want to bring any more attention to myself or my body, so instead, I curled in on myself, resting my chin on my knees. I couldn't even blame them for the bullying sometimes when I thought about it. I guess I know how that sounds. Even watching them from afar, I could see how many of these girls from Group A had fought to be in the room, fought to be an idol. And their skills matched their hunger. They could hit their marks each time without slowing the group down. Their stamina was unmatched, even on their apple diets and sleep-deprived schedules. They all had stage presence at 14. I didn't even want to be there half the time. My mind wandered. My body hurt from the moment I got up in the morning to the moment I went to sleep. Most of what I could think of was the pain, and what I could possibly do if I came this far without debuting. It would be a long road of debt to pay back what my parents owed. That's why I understood, why they kept me apart and made me feel like I didn't belong. There was an irony in my existence in the room, and it only increased by comparison with these girls. I was molded to be an immaculate pop star since I could walk, already well into the system by the time they were scouted at 11 or 12. Yet, I was slow in my choreography, imprecise. And my singing, despite me being the label's prize Frankenstein baby, wasn't somehow any more impressive than any of our youngest trainees. In everyone's eyes, and even, I suspect, to some of my managers, I was a failed experiment, one that they could only hope to recoup on after I debuted. I need you to apply yourself a little harder, Minjae. Jerry rested against the edge of his desk, folding his arms over his chest like a disappointed uncle. I understand, I nodded, trying to keep the explanations off my tongue. I learned a while ago that people weren't interested in understanding the reason the offense had happened, because they already made up their mind about you. Anything that didn't align with the narrative of you in their head was simply an excuse. I'm sorry, Jerry. I promise I'll work harder. Jerry looked at me for a moment as I delivered the apology he was looking for. He must have decided that he didn't see enough remorse in my face because he kept looking before saying, "We don't give you enough here?" I blinked. I'm sorry? I'm saying, you don't think we do enough for you here? Jerry gestured largely into the space between us. We keep you healthy, pay for all of your treatments and the regular checkups, put a fortune into training you, spent another fortune on planning and perfecting your debut over the long term. Yet I feel like you treat this like another job. It's the only job I've ever had, I said truthfully. And it shows, Jerry said, nodding. Some people would kill to stand where you're standing today. Really let that sink in. You're in a class of people who get to see the shiniest, most delicious slice of life. You get to entertain the masses, enjoy their mindless adoration. What's better than that? I looked at him for a moment, cycling through all of my truthful answers. Sleep would be better than that. Going to school uninterrupted. Attending formal. Telling a best friend all of my secrets. Having a crush on someone for the first time. I never got to enjoy any of those moments, not like a real kid. No, you're right, Jerry, I said, swallowing down the truth. I was born for this. I gave him a short, humorless laugh. I should start acting like it.
Thanks for listening. If you like the story so far, or you're just a big fan of indie sci-fi and you want to help support what we do, please consider joining us on Patreon. You can find the project details, listen to bloopers, and get the episodes 2 days early as a patron, along with high-resolution chapter art, character sketches, and bonus content. To sign up, head to patreon.com/yeahyankee. Once again, that's patreon.com/yeahyankee. Thanks for following along, and we'll catch you next time.